Hi there, I'm your host McAuley Tucker, and you're listening to The McAuley Tucker Show, the podcast where I sit down with some of the most accomplished and fascinating individuals in the entertainment and business industry. From celebrities to industry leaders, our guests offer unique perspectives and inspiring stories that will educate and inform you. Join me as I sit down with my next guest to cover their humble beginnings, challenges they faced, as well as their accomplishments in life. You are bound to learn something new, so sit back and enjoy the interview. Today on the McAuley Tucker Show, we had the special opportunity to interview Lou. Lou worked in the art department in specifically Incredibles, Ratatouille, Up, and Monsters, Inc. and more. He also had the special opportunity to voice Bernie, the teacher in Incredibles, and Linguini, the main chef in Ratatouille. And here we talk about that. Enjoy. I would love to start kind of at the beginning. I know you've spoken about your childhood, how your father and your mother used to be were a big part of your childhood. Your father used to teach you using visuals. He used a lot of visual methods to teach you. And I recall you've also spoken about how your mother took you out to see Time Bandits as a kid. So I'd love to hear more about how your early childhood, particularly growing up in a family with strong Italian heritage, how this influenced your values, your skills, and your interests.
It's a big topic, but yes, I'll start there. In fact, to answer your question, I went back home. I was living in the Bay Area. I was living in a sober house for 4 years. I was out of the loop for a while in animation since 2019. Now I'm just kind of feeling back to myself after, almost 6 years. And I'm feeling better and ready to work and get excited. But to answer your question, my father and mother. My father was born in Naples, south of Rome. My mother born in Sicily. They're both very talented and are creative, artistic, big families. They both immigrated to the U.S. My mother was a teacher of English, Spanish, and she was trilingual, Italian, Spanish, English, and my father as well. And he worked as a waiter. And so he was working a lot with many Mexicans and, as bus boys and maitre d's and working closely and speaking with Mexicans. And so anyway, very creative, big family. And I was always into art and movies. My mom and dad, my biological mother passed away young. She had frail health. It wasn't her fault, but, there was a lot of early difficulties kind of getting back on our feet. My dad and my sister and I, and going through different families. Art was always something, movies. Our dad took us to. He took us to like Pinocchio. I remember going to Pinocchio. That was the first time I saw an Italian man in a movie, Stromboli. I'm like, Dad, look, that's you. And he's like, me, it's my father. And he's like, shut up, like that, But so we're in the theater and he's taking me to that, Mary Poppins, other, big Disney movies. Yes, I remember Star Wars was one of the first movies he took my sister and I to see. All I remember is Chewbacca. And I remember we were waiting in line wrapped around the theater. We were in Fashion Valley or Mission Valley, the biggest screen by our house, one giant screen. That's where my parents took me to see Chariots of Fire in 1981 and Time Bandits and other big movies and Star Wars and Godfather 3 later. So, in 91, I think, Christmas break. So my dad, mom, we love movies. I loved art. I loved to draw. Kindergarten teacher, she said, get your kid in some drawing classes because when he's drawing, he's quiet, he's happy, he's not pooping in his pants or disturbing other children. And that's wonderful. So get him some classes. And my parents did. And that's how it started, McAuley.
You mentioned a lot of wonderful things there. You mentioned about how, your father was a waiter, and that will actually be a very interesting thing that we're going to talk more about food later, of course.
Yeah.
But that really stood out to me. I mean, we'll talk about this, of course, later, but you did a role of an individual who worked with food. So I thought that was very interesting to see that kind of parallel with your father working as a waiter and then you kind of being involved in a food related thing later.
Yeah.
You mentioned the trials you faced when you're younger, and I can imagine what the pain and the struggles that caused. But I found it very interesting that art helped you. I can probably assume art helped you and film helped you through that time, kind of being able to sit down and see these stories. I mean, movies are great, and I mean you've been involved in a lot. During your elementary school, you pursued both visual arts and theater arts. With one of your friends even saying that you were one of the most talented actors to come out of the classes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the similarities between theatrical acting and professional artistry, which you do quite a bit, which you
Yeah.
spent a lot of time doing. What was it that ultimately led to you specifically pursuing animation?
Let's see. Well, it started with the love of drawing, which, was discovered for me in kindergarten. As I said, my teacher, Martha Traub, she was I'm sure she's dead now because when I was in kindergarten, she was in her 60s. So I'm 52 now. So God bless Martha Traub, because she said, Luigi, yeah, sit here at the easel, paint the pictures, whatever. I was drawing a lot of fish and sharks. I knew about Jaws. I was drawing and painting a lot of great white sharks, even though I couldn't watch Jaws because I was 3. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I think that was a part of it. Later, I got into animation. So as I said, get your son into drawing classes. I did. I went to Balboa Park, wonderful, about 10, 15 kids with a wonderful teacher who taught us to look and draw. That's his big thing. Look and draw. Being observing and then drawing. Sometimes observing, watching, and then drawing without looking at the paper. And then, or just looking and then really looking and then going, okay, I'm going to put the line down and then being very thoughtful. So I did that in second grade. It was wonderful. A psychologist, because I was having trouble at school. Now, this might appeal to some people who feel marginalized, you know, whether they're trans or queer or gay or just on the spectrum or something. Doctor said I was socially retarded. And my parents said, what? You mean he's got Down syndrome? And they're like, no, he just can't make friends. And they were like, oh, what are we going to do with Luigi? The doctor said, get him in San Diego Junior Theater, which my mom introduced me to when I was 8 years old. We went to see, Wizard of Oz and a bunch of other shows, Rumpelstiltskin. And I told my mom, this is what I want to do. What these kids are doing, wherever they come from, I want to do that. And I started taking classes, stage combat, dance, singing, acting, scene study mostly, a lot of improv. Get up, kids, and play around. It was great. And by 11 years old, I was in the first musical I was in, Little Mary Sunshine, which takes place in Canada. It's about the Canadian mounted soldiers and beautiful women and some native indigenous peoples. And it's a comedy. And so I did that. It was great. And I did that till I was in high school. Musical theater and also straight dramas, which I want to say is unique because, for example, when I was a freshman in high school, we were putting on Pirates of Penzance. That's our comedy for musical for the fall, winter. And then we're also doing Spoon River Anthology. What's that? That's a play that's made up of verse poems about people coming out of the grave talking about their past lives. Anyone that comes out of a grave has a monologue about, hey, I killed my wife, or, it's sad when you slit your throat and all the blood gets all over the cushions. I mean, it was that kind of play. So I'm 14 years old. I'm like, these monologues are crazy. I want to be doing this kind of stuff. We're not doing that in animation. Um, my friend told me about CalArts. Hey, you like Walt Disney, right? Like me. I said, of course I do. Let's go watch The Black Cauldron and a bunch of other stuff like Great Mouse Detective. And those were the dregs. That's all we had back in 1985. Anyway, that's just I'm sorry. I just want to say that was great. And he introduced me to CalArts in my junior year. And I shifted gears. I was going to do theater arts major. Then I went animation, bring all the arts, boom, together. Um, yeah.
No, that I really appreciate that. That makes a lot more sense. And I mean, like,
Mm.
as your friend said, you were I found this written somewhere. You're one of the individuals that went to your school said that he thought you were one of the most talented actors to come out of that class. So it seems as if
Oh,
that program had a major impact on you. As you
uh-huh.
mentioned, after high school, you attended CalArts and you participated in workshops in Los Angeles and you worked on a lot of
Yeah,
cool projects during that time, including Whoop Ass
yeah,
Stew, which was involved into Powerpuff Girls. And
that's
it was,
right.
you also contributed to the Page Master. I know that was a fun project. And
Yeah,
that's where
yeah,
you actually met Brad Bird. And so this is a very interesting question. I mean, many people have spoken about him, and I'd love to ask you this. Beyond
yeah.
being a director and a creator, I know you've worked with him on several projects. How would you say he and his work has influenced your life and played a significant role in your personal and also your professional growth?
Brad, working with Brad was for me, my first real big break in anime. When someone says, "Hey, who gave you your first break?" and they're like, "Hey, Roger Corman, he let me direct Piranhas or whatever." Brad was that for me. I was in on Page Master. I started in character cleanup, doing character in betweening, which was not fun to me. I said, I'm tired of drawing all these Whoopi Goldberg books and Patrick Stewart and Frankenstein books. I really like what's going on in the visual effects department. They're doing Dragonfire, Pixie Dust, Smoke, Magic, everything that I like. And so I was like, hey, I want to do that. They let me do it. I did assistant animation for Jeff Howard, who was a very hard taskmaster. But I'll tell you, he taught me how to draw because I had to in between his drawings, and he was very particular. And people at Hanna-Barbera that I went to school with told me, why don't you come to Hanna-Barbera and, pitch your own show? We got shows. I said, that sounds great, but I really like doing this fire. So I'm going to do that for a while. And that's how I met Brad. He came into Turner Feature Animation during the production, I think of early production of Cats Don't Dance. He came in, he was like a guest artist. Then he came on to direct his Ray Gun. And but he also he gave notes to the story crew or the film on Cats Don't Dance. And after that, he just worked on his own thing. And I can't remember, I was on that about a year. I want to say 1 year, maybe a little more, doing visual development that ultimately, stalled and then turned into Brad's opportunity to take the Iron Giant from other folks and adapt it himself and then turn that into the feature film. But he's great to answer your question because he's unwavering in it. What I love about Brad, when we went to Pixar, he's like, listen, this is a big learning curve for everyone. Pixar and you and me, because never did CG. So we'll figure it out together. We got a core team. So you guys are going to be learning with me and guys and gals, and everyone's going to learn. And then we're going to figure it out. And he also knows how to pick his battles. That's very unique. Things like I remember asking Brad, "Hey Brad, are you going to address all these notes that the executive brain trust team's giving you for the story?" And he said, "Well, what I do personally is I address the notes that I feel are going to make the movie I want to make stronger. The other stuff, just put that off to the side and focus on what I want to make." And then we'll come back to it. You see what I mean? A lot of people don't do that. Some people go, I'm going to address every note that John Lasseter or Jeffrey Katzenberg or XYZ has. And I think sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot when you do that.
Yeah.
So Brad doesn't do that as far as when I worked with him. And that was my favorite thing about him. It's like, this is the movie. Follow the storyboards, please. I'm trying to save layout time because we got 5,000 human characters to design and 125 locations. So just follow my storyboards, please.
Wow, that's very fascinating to hear his impact on, on your career, and it definitely shows in what you're telling me. And you mentioned a
Yeah,
lot of wonderful things there. You mentioned Raygun, and that's a really interesting project because you
yeah.
actually worked a bit on that too. And I know that project.
was you worked on that back in 1995, around there, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it never came to be. It's actually been reported recently that Brad Bird is hoping, crossing your fingers, to release it on
Mm.
Netflix in 2026. Though the future of the film remains uncertain, especially with its
Hmm.
budget. It's exceeding, I think, 150 million. But you were involved with the film back in 1995. You started out in the visual development, and then you began to do into the effects, as you mentioned. Can you
Yeah.
tell me? I know there's limitations. I've spoken with a lot of people. There's limitations as to what can be shared, but can you tell me a bit about this project in particular? I've heard a lot of wonderful things about it, but you were involved kind of in the developing and creating of it. I'd love to hear a bit about this project.
That's right. I think when I first met Brad, it was in the fall of 1994. So 30 years ago, like this month. And he just told me about Ray Gunn. And I was trying to get into visual development, and I showed some of my artwork that I was doing on the side to the Turner Feature folks. They said, "We're fully staffed right now, but Brad's coming in. We'll share your work with him. And if he's gonna hire development." And Brad saw my stuff. We talked. He said, "I want to hire you to do Viz Dev." And I did. And he helped me out. I was first starting color work with him, pastel work and some gouache paintings, having trouble in color. He said, "Hey, stop the color. Let's just do black and white for like a month. And let's watch all the best black and white cinematography we can get our hands on pertaining to film noir and this movie." And we did. And I did everything black and white for more than a month. It helped me immensely uh, in my color work. And then, we also had Tony Facilli, who was doing animation, character design. Teddy Newton, I believe, he was doing story ideas and stuff as well. And there were some story artists as well. Jeff Lynch is a longtime Simpsons fella that Brad worked with. He was head of story. And then there were like two or three story artists. That was it. And maybe one freelance animator or sculptor. Yeah. It was a small team, but and we did that for a year. And when I left, Brad was still working on it for maybe another 6 months before the plug I was pulled and before the Iron Giant became kind of available as something for him to develop.
That's fair. Yeah, no, and I really hope that we can someday see that project. It sound like it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's been announced yet, but that is something that is in the works. I don't have a date for you on the
Yeah.
release, but it's something that, and like I said, I don't know if it's been announced, honestly, so I don't even know if I can mention anything more about it, other than, Brad is at not DreamWorks, sorry, Brad is at Sky Dance. That much is known, with John Lasseter and the team there at Skydance, but I don't know when it's coming out yet.
That's fair. No, I
Yeah.
understand that completely. But wow, like that project, you mentioned the black and white, like, and how that helped you learn and grow. And so, even in a project that never saw the light of day, it helped you in many ways, from what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it
And it will
was,
see the
yeah,
light of day coming up, but that date I'm not sure exactly. Yeah.
yeah, who knows? But I'm really excited to see it. It sounds so fascinating.
Yeah.
It was soon in the 90s. It was in the 90s that you were part of a smaller team that began creating early concept work for The Incredibles. It was a small team of you. And I understand that process involved you guys kind of embracing and understanding the culture and aesthetics of the 1960s. I know it involved fashion, film, and more, which was a
Hmm.
similar approach that you later did for Up when you traveled to get inspiration. So I would love to hear more about um, how this approach helps film in general. Like, you guys went around to study this stuff for Incredibles. You guys went around to
Yeah.
study this stuff for Up. Can you share how this not only shaped the film themselves, but shaped you as a person in your knowledge and your understanding of things?
I'll tell you the thing that was most inspiring was we met with it early on in Incredibles. Now we've got our core art department, and now we're bringing on other people too, like Brynna McGeary, who was the shading art director and was new to us. I'd known her before because I worked on Monsters a bit, and she was on Bugs Life. That was her first show, I think. And So she's like, she has impeccable taste and she's doing all the shading, the fabrics, all the texturing and the calling out of like what materials are going to be, So we went to Donald Olson is a Bay Area mid-century modern architect. This guy is brilliant. He and his wife allowed us, Bryn and I think about 6 to 8 artists into their home in the Berkeley Hills. And he walked us through this house that he had designed himself, talking about like, I designed it this way for the light to come in at this certain time of day. And here's my area where I like to write and draw. And then we took us upstairs all the way. It was like 3 stories to the topmost. This was just a room that was like a sunroom, almost like a belfry where you could hang out. And that was just his quiet room. So that was really fascinating, just seeing how not only how he designed the home, but how he designed the home around the nature. This kind of philosophy, it's like you don't come in and just mow down a bunch of trees. You come in like Frank Lloyd Wright, you go, how are we going to build a house around this oak tree that's been here 2,000 years or whatever, and make it integrate beautifully with my man-made structure, and
Wow.
complement nature. Yeah. So we did that not just with one architect, we did it with several. And we also worked with an architect who did a book about mid-century modern homes, Paul Adamson. It's a wonderful book. He was our tour guide for all the Eichler homes and all the mid-century homes in the Bay Area, which there are many.
Hearing you tell that and explain that to me, it makes me realize all the moving parts that are involved in creating a movie, let alone even a film like The Incredibles. And it's like, wow, that must be a fun job. I love exploring things. I love
Oh,
finding the unknown. And that was your
yeah.
job in a way.
Yeah. You go that, do you do go just to research, or whenever you go out, are you drawing in a sketchbook or taking pictures for study later? What do you
Yeah,
do?
when I go around, I love exploring. I've lived in my city since I was a kid, but just
Yeah.
recently I've been walking around downtown, going to the record store, finding obscure media. I don't take
Yeah.
around a book per se, but I should. I like that unknown stuff. It's so fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I've gotten in the habit of taking a sketchbook. Like I like Moleskine sketchbooks, no lines, just plain blank page. I use it for writing and journaling, but also for drawing. And it's just a receptacle for ideas, is what it is.
Wow.
They can be, some artists like a Nicola, is it Marley, who's done many wonderful designs at DreamWorks movies like Kung Fu Panda, the whole styling. That's Nicola. You open his sketchbooks, this could be published as is. My sketchbooks like chicken scratch and little notes and pick up the mail and get the milk and don't forget to pick up the daughter at 6 or whatever, the kids. But thumbnails, it's just everyday life. Also, if I see something I like, I'm gonna take a picture of it. So the
Wow.
iPhone that's you're making a movie in your pocket. People need to be taking some snaps for not just, hey, we're having fun at the beach. No, I'm looking at the beach as the place where I'm gonna live in the future in my movie, whatever your movie story is.
Wow. I need to do that more that you mentioned that. I think it's important. Like I want to grow as a writer. I'm writing a story right now that I can talk a bit about
Yeah.
after the interview. But I,
Uh,
I want to learn how to write more. And so I like
yeah.
how you do that. And I really appreciate you share. Like that's crazy. I mean,
I
and
love it. That's what Ray Bradbury was saying. Like, hey, I wrote a story every day for since I was 10 years old, and now I'm a writer. So it's like if you just keep at it, I guess. He said, you're gonna write for the rest of your life every day. Nothing's gonna be great, and then one day you'll write something that makes you cry, and you'll be a writer. And for him, it was a story called The Lake about a
like,
man who who temporarily separates from his wife to go to the lake. He's going to connect with her again, but he has this whole flashback to his childhood and his first love with this little girl. They were both 12. And basically he wrote that story in one night, just almost stream of conscious. And at the end of it, he said he was weeping. And he said, that's when I knew I had a story that maybe not everyone's gonna like, but I like it. See?
Storytelling is just beautiful. I mean,
Yeah.
I always have these ideas that pop into my mind, and on stories. I mean, this goes perfect to the next question. Stories. Incredibles and Ratatouille. I mean, you know how important those two films have been for so
Yeah.
many people. I grew up watching The Incredibles in my grandma's little theater in her basement, and
Wait, how old were you when the first Incredibles came out
oh,
in 2004?
I was not born yet. I was born 2005, so I
What?
watched it.
No, no, I'm old. Yeah, I was. Oh, really? I was 32, I think.
Really? Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I watched it 2005, 2006, and Ratatouille. I grew up with that. Those are two films that
Okay.
are very important. You know how important those are.
I know.
I
Yeah.
would love to hear, you've mentioned that you had the opportunity to voice like a character in The Incredibles. You also had the opportunity to voice, of course, character in Ratatouille. You've mentioned that voicing these characters was a way for you to stay creatively engaged outside of your animation work. And I would love to hear more about specifically how these roles kept you creatively engaged. Is it true that you actually thought that you wanted to have Alan Arkin actually do the voice of the teacher, Bernie, that in
Oh,
Incredibles? It is also true that you mopped the floor to get in the role of Linguini in Ratatouille.
uh, that first part of that is true. I recommended to Brad. I said, you know who I'm thinking of this for this character is Alan Arkin. He'd be great. It's like him. Him is Edward Scissorhands as Winona Ryder's dad, and he's like, "Hey, Edward, how you doing?" And he's like, remember when he wakes up in the middle of the night and Alan Arkin is like, "Here, have some bourbon. It'll fix you right up." And he's like freaking out. He's like, "Good stuff, isn't it?" Alan Arkin's great. I love him and everything. But he said, "Why don't you do it?" And so I did, and I'm probably cheaper than Alan Arkin, so they used me. Anyway, the other part of your question, I did not do any physical mopping, but they did record me in the studio and I think some animators might have used that video reference at
Okay.
Pixar. Yeah. And if there was some mopping, I think they were doing it and filming themselves, really. You know how
Yeah,
they are, right? They like to do that.
that's fair. Like that
Yeah.
project, I mean, like growing up, like I never actually, I think it was when I was a bit older that I realized you did both those characters. And when I watched Ratatouille, I'm like, this is real. Like something about your role, it was special.
Oh,
It reminds me like my first ever guest I had on my show, somebody similar to you. He was actually a storyboard artist, and his name was Mark Walton, and
okay.
he was casted as the voice of the
Oh,
hamster
yes.
in Disney's Bolt. So
I met that. I met him at a convention. Yeah,
wait, you
Mark Walton.
really, you
Yeah,
know Mark? Yeah, he's a good
I
friend of
know
mine.
him. No, you know what? I met him at the very first CTN X Expo in 2009. I went to the very first one in Burbank at the Burbank Marriott, and I know it's since it grew and then it kind of faded and then became Lightbox, I guess. So
Yeah,
I've not been to Lightbox, but yeah, I know I met Mark there when he
yeah,
was just riding that wave of Bolt, right? It
yeah,
just come
Bolt.
out, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. That was yeah. And so watching, it's like it's cool how these companies are able to I would say bless you guys with this opportunity to be a part of the story that you're working on. Like that must be a dream come true.
Yeah, I do. I love that they do that, and I like any studio or place like a Mike Judge who is voicing the characters he's created. It's just the authorship you have, and it's less compartmentalized, where it's like, okay, you guys draw the boards, and then there's the script, or which one is first, the script or the board, and then we have the layout, and then we have the record. And no, it's more fluid. It's
Hmm.
hey, let's record something and then listen back, and then maybe we'll improvise more, and then we'll write. It's so I feel Brad is up for anything, and any director that's like, let's try it. That's the kind of people you want to be with. If the ones are like, well, this is how we do it, and we've always done it this way, and if you like to do it this way, you can learn how to do it this way. But if you don't want to, huh, I'd say go somewhere else and figure some things out,
And you learn a lot from trying things, trying new things.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Throw
And
the
those two
spaghetti.
yeah.
Throw the spaghetti, McAuley. And what sticks? Hey, I'm Italian, so you know what? You don't like spaghetti? We got fettuccine, linguine, bucatini, rotelli. Which one do you like? You don't like spaghetti? Guess what? Compost, recycle. What do you want? Rice? What other starches? I'm flexible, you know.
Absolutely. And those two characters, I mean, they've had a major impact as we've talked about. Like,
Yeah.
they've been brought back in various projects, the video games, things like that.
Oh,
I'd
yes.
love to hear your thoughts on seeing these characters make a return. I know just recently they released Lego Incredibles, and they actually included both Bernie and Linguini as a playable character in those games. And you can like go on YouTube, you can actually hear all their lines, just grunts
Wait
and
a
stuff.
minute.
Yeah.
You mean CG Legos, right?
Yeah.
Oh boy, you guys are behind. I'm behind the times because this is funny. Technology, my son was like, Dad, can we go play with some friends, Pokemon Go? He showed me can I get on your phone? I was like, yeah, where are your friends? We're walking to the park. He's like, they're right here on the phone. We see the dots and we're
Yeah.
walking, my son and I. Then we get to the park. I'm like, where are these kids? Where are your buddies, your friends? He's like, they're in the phone, Dad. It's Pokemon Go, buddy. And I'm like, what? Are they showing up with pizza? What's going on here? So I'm dumb. I'm a dinosaur, and you people are smart. You're way ahead of me.
That's fair. I mean, but yeah, like the Lego, yeah, they released Lego released a
Uh-huh.
Incredibles video game. All Lego,
Okay.
all
Yeah.
Lego, and Bernie comes back, and also Linguini is a playable character in this game.
Oh.
But yeah, I was just gonna ask you, like, have you been reached out to at all about kind of coming back into these shoes of these characters for anything? I mean, ever since those
Uh,
projects released.
not on a feature level, but since 2007, which is when Ratatouille was originally released, I've probably recorded, I would say, half a dozen times at least for video games and also rides. Uh, like the last one I did was for a Euro Disney, which is in Paris, for a Ratatouille themed,
Mm.
because it's Paris. And so I had some specific lines to read. Disney calls me up. I go to a sound studio somewhere close by, and someone pipes into direction to me through the headphones. I'm like, okay. And they say, we got it. And then it's in a game or in a diorama or something. It's weird, but I rarely see those things. I did see the one in Disneyland on Main Street with the linguini in the little diorama, like spinning around with the Remy on his hat. And it was so charming and well done. I love little window dioramas like that.
Well, I'm assuming then probably one of the recordings of your characters were probably used in the Lego game. Again, it was just grunts. It was just various grunts of sort. And
Oh,
I'm like,
they got tons of that stuff. And some of it's not even me. I bet some of it's Soupy Sales or Jack Benny or someone like that. They recorded, maybe Peter Lorre, they recorded from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
yeah,
And they just cut those in and call it a day.
who
But I get
knows?
the check. Hey, as long as I get the check, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like that, after Pixar, you went on to work at Leica. You worked there for a bit. You did painting and illustrating. It was another company. You went there. You did
Yeah.
you showcased at galleries. You also, which I thought was cool, was you actually created a cover for the New Yorker in 2007. That was a really cool opportunity that I
That's
saw.
right.
And
Yeah.
like I'd love to hear more about kind of that gap after 2009, and also coming back to Pixar in 2021, I believe, to work on I believe it was Luca. It was
That's right.
so,
Oh, yeah.
and I would love to hear, because you left Pixar, you went back to
Yeah.
Pixar. What was that world like? What did you like about the changes, and what were some things that you're like, this is really interesting, just in general, this period of
In
time?
general, first time I went to Pixar for 6 months in '97 to work for Pete Docter and on Monsters Inc. And
Mhm.
at that time, Pete Docter and Ralph Eggleston, I believe, were co-directing. And then Ralph uh, left that show. I later went to do Bert for the Birds. Anyway, my stint was short because I really enjoyed doing the development, but I got a little disillusioned, I think, because uh, the stylization was changing, and John Lasseter came in. It's like, okay, yeah, I see you're having fun, but let's make it more real world based. And that seemed less interesting to me. So I quit. I said, sorry, guys, I want to take some improv. And I did. I went to the Groundlings, but I was also doing freelance at Nickelodeon and other places around town. Uh, then I went to Pixar again for Brad, on The Incredibles. And that was a unique experience because it felt like we could be anywhere really with Brad, and it would just be we're with Brad. I mean, if he was making The Incredibles in his garage as a hand-drawn animated movie, I would have done that. Pixar, I did that. Wherever he was going to go, that's where I was going to go to make the movie, 2D or 3D. But I'm glad it worked out at Pixar, and we were there at a unique time when Steve Jobs was very, very involved. If he was not at Pixar and you didn't see him in the halls on stage for a company meeting or in his office, he was at Apple, coming up with iPhones and stuff. So that was a unique time where he was like the big picture view. I don't know who that person is now. I don't know if they have someone like that, but he saw the big picture of everything. And he's the one who was like, let's bring Brad Bird in from the outside. Right when we're on a wave of success, riding the tip of that wave of which one? Toy Story 2. That was a huge hit. Monster, Bug's Life, etc. And so that was that. Then I took a year off after Incredibles. I felt like, okay, 4 years of high school and college at once. I need a year off. I didn't work for any other studios. Pixar said, you can take the year off, come back in a year, don't work for anyone else. And when I came back, it was for Up, which I worked on from 2005 to 2008, I believe, and then left, and got frustrated and was like, what am I doing? But I am glad I went to Leica for that year and a half. That was a wonderful experience. So, leaving Pixar opened that door, and they treated me really nice. And I was commuting there, working and living there Monday through Friday. My wife was down here where we were in the Bay Area, and we were trying to get pregnant too. So she was having morning sickness while I was doing that. And ultimately the pregnancy was healthy and going. And so I said, I got to leave and come back to the Bay Area. And I left Leica. And then after that, just freelance and different projects here and there.
And you went back
Gotcha.
you went to like, after that experience, you went back to Pixar in 2021. I don't know what you did for,
it was for Luca. It was 3 weeks of 3 or 4 weeks of visual development.
Yeah.
For Daniela Strijleva, who was the production designer on Luca. And so I worked with her a lot and a little bit with Enrico and a couple other artists. It was only for 3. I wish I could have contributed more, and I wish this was me like after a mental health kind of crisis where I wasn't feeling great, but I was trying to get back to work. And I have to be honest, I feel like that work I did on Luca, I was just barely feeling like myself, but they were nice. And I felt like, okay, I had a good experience with Daniela and Pixar, and, so I feel like it's okay.
And it's cool that you got to go back and, even though it'd been so long since you were at Pixar, kind of going back and kind of contributing to a project there.
Yeah. And this is also something interesting that maybe younger people and people that are just starting out in the industry can remember, that, I made a lot of mistakes, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And you know what? That's okay. That's how you're going to learn. If you can just focus on what you can learn from the situation you're in, both creatively and personally, interpersonally, meaning how to deal with people in a healthy way, you're going to be okay. Okay. You're there for the work. For me, I'm here to do the art. I love the art, the imagination, the wonder, the musical theater, the drama, the performing, the designing, the lighting. I mean, the stuff I used to do as a kid with my Castle Grayskull and He-Man figures. I used to take the lampshade off the lamp and just spend like hours in my room just putting the light bulb around and like, hey, what's that do? When I put the rim light like this on He-Man and Skeletor, I'm doing the same stuff now. But now people are paying me to do it for their projects. And oh boy, so good luck if you can do that and then do it on your own projects. Transpose that knowledge into your own personal work and life.
And that
Yeah,
like
man.
that ties with, I mean, the message that I typically ask at the end. But involving film, I mean, you talked about creating and storytelling. You
Mm.
recently actually created a short film and put it on YouTube titled, I believe it was called Sweet Dreams. I don't quite know.
Oh
Um,
yeah, Sweet
and
Dreams was
yeah,
yeah.
it features you working with raw meat while a song plays in the background. The song reflects a person acknowledging that someone they love doesn't feel the same way, and that's a time to move on, but you still feel attached to it. And the visuals also include pictures from the films that you've worked on over the years, like
Right.
Ratatouille. I'd love to ask, what was the deeper meaning behind this short film, and what was kind of the whole purpose of that project? I was like, wow, this is crazy deep.
I appreciate you calling that out because that was very personal, and I thought this is really just for me to work
Mm,
out some issues.
mm,
I'll tell you, during the 4 years I was living in that sober house, I was not working in animation. I was working on mental health, getting back on track and trying to repair damage with my children and wife and
mm,
my own family and friends and but this is this is all part of life. That's going to happen. You don't just drop that when you leave the job and you deal with that at home. It's not compartmentalized. It's very, if you can organize and orchestrate and go, okay, I'm going to deal with this in small chunks. But you know how life is. It comes in, and depending on how well you deal with it, that's how you get through it, is how
mm.
well you deal with your stress. Do you fold and explode, or do you beat yourself up, or do you beat other people up? What's your healthy way of dealing with normal stressful schedules? Like, hey, we need this last Tuesday, Lou. Can you get it to us yesterday? And then you're like, oh boy. You just have to speak up and work with people to find the right way for you. You have to tailor the way you want to work to yourself and make sure that's clear with everyone you're working with. Like, this is how I like to work. How do you like to work? Let's adapt.
And I thought that was just really cool, seeing that. I've also was able to see some shorts that you worked on before, watching these projects that you've done and watching that one. It was like, wow, I can kind of
Oh,
feel I can feel what you're trying to tell me. And I was
I
watching it.
was in, yeah, we in 2019, that was the worst mental breakdown I'd had. I had another one in 2013, and some of these were fueled, okay, I'll be honest, but by mental health, uh, anxiety, and in the case of the most recent one, bipolar disorder. I didn't know I was bipolar until I was 47 years old.
Hmm.
And that was kind of upsetting to find out. And it took a year and a half, 18 months for my brain to kind of just get back to feeling like I can get out of bed again and I know my name and stuff. So I mean, if you've been through anything like that, or, I hope you never do, being young and 19, but if you can weather it, then and make it out okay and make some art out of it, then you're doing okay, I think. And that's why I did what I did with the Sweet Dreams, because I worked there. I was paid minimum wage, which was like $17 an hour to be an apprentice meat clerk at the Molly Stone's meat department in Marin. That was just so I could get payment to maybe pay the rent where I was living and just a little, pocket money. Um, but it inspired me. Working there inspired me to make that film. And it made me feel like, yeah, let's have a Sweet Dreams, a love song, unrequited love. It's funny. And so I appreciate you flagged that. Thanks for enjoying that.
I appreciate you letting me ask that question. But
Yeah.
now it sounds like you going over your life. You've done a lot, and I know that as you mentioned to me through text. You're at Sony now, so like from what you can tell,
Yeah.
like what is life looking for you now, and what are you excited for? What projects are you looking forward to the most?
Well, the project I'm on right now in Sony is really fun. It has not been announced yet.
Mhm.
But and we're still in early days, but I'm not sure when that will be announced, but I've only been on it for about 6 weeks
Mm.
as production designer, and we're assembling our team, and we're getting there, and looking towards the new year in the spring. Sony is, I think it's been announced that they're planning on tentatively, this is tentative, to move to a new location from Culver City to where will be a building at LACMA, LA County Museum. So right across the street from the tar pits and the museum is where the new Sony building will be. It's a existing building that's just been gutted and refurbished for CG production.
Wow.
So that's that's a big deal because everyone in LA, is like, gee, how long is it going to take me to get to work? And so people are deciding where they're going to live and move to get to the new location, you know.
Mhm.
I mean,
Well,
this is a new thing to me. I don't know if it's new to you, McAuley, this kind of new hybrid work system where people aren't coming into the studio every day. They're just coming in right now 1 day a week on my project. For other projects like Spider-Verse 3, those people are coming in more like 3 or 4 days a week. But it's a different model, and it's interesting to see how what the pluses and minuses are, and the adapting of that. Yeah.
yeah. I'm very happy to see that you've got this position and you're working with this company and seeing you back in
Thanks.
the creative world because your work is really special. I love your art. I've seen some of your art and I'll be sure to share that with people that check out the show. It's wonderful and I'm very
Thank you,
excited
McAuley.
to see that.